Hey there, everybody. My name is Shiva, and I wanted to walk you all through my when to iterate versus when to move on to a new test, loosely guiding framework to kind of help on the decision making for this. This kind of came up for me just thinking about, I think I was running like the seventh iterative test, and I was still seeing some success, but I was trying to determine, at what point do I move on to a new concept entirely and start testing out something new, versus at what point does it make sense to continue in iterating because there's still some juice left to squeeze, so to speak. So I wanted to create a framework to loosely guide on this. So for me, iterations, and my frame of reference with this is I like to skew more heavily towards iterating as much as I can because a lot of times the cost of an iteration is a lot less than the cost of building something entirely brand new, especially from the dev perspective. So that's why I tend to skew towards iterating a little bit more. Your risk for iterating might depend on the test that's backfilling, etc. What I'll also say is this particular framework, I think, should be built into your prioritization framework. But this is kind of a very loose way of visualizing that prioritization. Um, because a prioritization framework also is something that you should adapt to your business rather than just kind of copy what someone else is doing and just blindly use that. You should adapt it to your business needs, you should adapt it to your resourcing, etc. So this is a way to kind of visualize the iterate versus move on mechanism and thought process and try and attempt to build some of these things into your prioritization framework. So where I like to be is if there's still juice left to squeeze, meaning you've run less than 3 tests, but it's still generating a bunch of high quality tests, then continue to iterate. There still probably is juice left to squeeze. What I'll say is if at any point you've run a bunch of tests and you haven't conducted any research, that's probably your biggest starting point is just conduct research. It's important. Your iterations will thank you for running tests backed in research. Your experimentation program will. As you continue to do it, if you have maybe a test that's only backed in one source of research, potentially augment that research and focus a little bit more on the research side because investing a little bit more in research may help you understand on where to iterate into rather than just kind of pulling ideas out of air or looking at competitors, etc. So for me, it's important to look at where the research is guiding you in where to prioritize and where to kind of focus on as part of your iteration. If as you conduct additional research, you're not really finding any new avenues to explore, that's where you might want to say, potentially move on to something else as part of a new test. The other thing I'll say is if it is a very, very big business priority, you'll probably want to iterate just from the, continuing to push the business forward and answer questions as much as you can for the business. Continue to iterate there. So yeah, I'd say this kind of came to me as I was working with a client where we iterated on a concept maybe 4 times, and the research was saying that there was something there, but in 3 or 4 different iterations, we were just seeing all negative results, nothing just working. So that's when we decided it wasn't a concept worth exploring, and it started to get deprioritized in our framework where other tests were starting to have more research backed into it, and that's when we decided to make the shift to say this concept is not as worth it. We did learn something along the way. Now there are other tests with more research that are fresh that we want to test into, so that's where we kind of made that decision using this very loose framework. Feel free to download the blueprint, keep this as something to keep in your mind. But I will say, I think best case scenario is you build this logic or something like the mechanisms around the logic into your own prioritization framework rather than keeping this chart explicitly. I think it'll be more helpful for you to automate this in your prioritization framework at some of the logic rather than kind of just have this chart kind of stand on its own. So if that's not easy to do and it is quite hard to build some of the concepts of this logic, I think this chart's perfectly okay to just kind of keep in the back of your mind. This is also something that I believe should evolve and should continue to evolve. So please feel free to reach out to me with any feedback, any criticisms, potentially if you have any words of affirmation that you found this incredibly helpful, that you really like this. Would love to hear that feedback. We'll happily take any positive and negative feedback. If there is something that is worth to tweaking based on your feedback, happy to kind of incorporate that feedback into the design as it makes sense. So hopefully you like this, hopefully you enjoyed this. Yeah, thanks for watching.